So the third of our interventionist strategies then is FDI, which isn't a strategy in and of itself, of course. The strategy is to try to attract FDI. And as I've noted before, you could say that there are elements of liberalisation in this as you open up to FDI. There are elements of export promoting if you build infrastructure for FDI. But we can look at it as a kind of relatively freestanding area, because there's a lot of debate in both economics and geography about the extent to which TNCs, MNCs are particularly desirable. But this type of thing is quite important not to just kind of go FDI is a strategy. I mean, you wave your magic FDI wand and along come the transnationals. It doesn't quite work that way. So if you're going to write about it, it's really important to kind of say, well, unless you're purely asked about the costs and benefits, but if you're trying to talk about it as a strategy, then it's really important to kind of say, well, okay, how do we do that? So this may well involve things like deregulation, to make rules and regulations such that foreign multinationals will be attracted, and that may mean softening things like labour and environmental laws, or it just may mean reducing kind of set up regulations and that type of stuff. It's probably going to be quite important to ensure that you have macroeconomic stability. So actually a simple policy, but maybe, is just to try to make sure that your economy overall is relatively stable with low levels of inflation, stable growth, and so on. That's attractive to multinationals that want to have confidence about the level of profitability that they're likely to face. And other things you can do is you can use kind of interventionist strategies of the like that we were talking about with EPI, things like building industrial units, to reduce costs, or tax breaks, to try to mean that profits are high. So there are a variety of ways in which you can attempt to attract foreign direct investment. Once you've done so, it's going to say, well, to what extent do we think that foreign direct investment is likely to be beneficial? So we can look at it in a number of different areas. So one area that we can have a think about it is in the form of jobs. These are likely to be both direct jobs in the transnational multinational itself, indirect jobs in the supply chain. So if it's a manufacturer, it'll need supplies. It's inconvenient to bring those supplies from the far side of the world. Therefore, it'll need local businesses to supply it. So in principle, obviously, what that's going to do is it's going to increase incomes. You get then that may lead to more savings. You get your kind of Harrod-Domar story, so that maybe there'll be further investment promoting further growth, or the obvious point, it may well lead to an increase in the tax base, which allows the government to do stuff. It may just lead to an increase in individual living standards. So in principle, that sounds jobs sounds relatively positive. We do know though that there are concerns over things like wages, conditions. So some of you that I taught, we looked at that copper mine in Zambia where workers weren't given safety helmets until they'd been working there for 2 years, which is a bit self-selecting. But we also said that sometimes MNCs, they bring their own workers. So it's not necessarily the case. And in those cases, then you're not getting the kind of another argument here is we get kind of build up of skills and so on. If they bring their own workers, then maybe that's not going to be so strong. When we talk about so related to that, there's kind of skills, technology, that type of stuff. Particularly, it's a kind of knowledge-based type thing, which is so. Secondly, it's kind of this idea that we're going to bring management expertise, and kind of the use of technology. It's often the case that if you are in a low-income country, then you haven't had much experience with this type of stuff. And what has happened in a lot of countries is transnationals have come along, multinationals have come along. People have gone to work there. They said, they do this way, which may or may not be great. They do this that way, which may or may not be great. And then they've gone off and used the employees have then gone off to start their own businesses using some of the techniques, technologies, management styles, and strategies that we used in the transnational. So there's a kind of transfer of knowledge, and that's quite important. knowledge and expectations, contacts, how to go about doing things, how do you export, blah, 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 all that stuff. As soon as you've got the transnational there, that knowledge starts to build. A third one is just the obvious point. That FDI is by definition investment. So they're going to come build factories, build roads, build some infrastructure for their own use. So as a result, it's going to lead to an increase in aggregate demand, which then has multiplier effects. And also, they're likely to, often the transnational isn't aiming to sell just to you, on the basis that you're a low-income country. It's often aiming to use you as a, a supply base and manufacturing base to sell to other countries as well. So again, that reinforces that improvement in aggregate demand, and it helps to improve the trade balance or currency gap, whatever you want to call it, which is fine. So we are industrializing in that way. You need to be aware of the risk of the repatriation of profit. And that, although we're not covering it in this set of exams, it's kind of GNI versus GDP. Transnationals increase your GDP, but they might not increase GNI quite so much. All industrialization, comes with environmental consequences. But local businesses, at least are staffed, at least owned by people who live in the country. Multinationals are far less likely to care about the environmental consequences on your economy. And so again, if there aren't good regulations in place, you may have issues. And if there are good regulations in place, then maybe they won't want to come in the first place. Then a particular type of foreign direct investment that we've looked at has been this idea of the package deal. This has been quite common in sub-Saharan Africa, but not there alone. And what happens is that the multinational will come and get rights to produce. Usually we're looking here at now primary products. And in exchange, there is a package of loans, infrastructure, kind of free funds, that type of stuff. So an example that we looked at, if I taught you, was in Gabon. Gabon has this iron ore deposit called the Belinga iron ore field or something. And a Chinese transnational multinational came in and said, well, look, okay, if you give us the right to buy this iron ore, what we'll do is we will build a deep water port, that obviously our ships can use, but so can yours. We'll build you a railway, that runs admittedly to the to the iron ore field, but you can use it. We're going to build a hydroelectric power station, and we're going to bring all the mining equipment that's necessary. So that was a pretty good deal, by and large, because Gabon isn't at that point wasn't the world's most stable economy, and they wouldn't have been able to extract the resource anyway. I mean, the dangers obviously is that it can further heighten primary product dependency. That's a risk, and push you into an area that you don't want to be. And that was, what we were talking about with ISI, the previous Singer hypothesis. Other issues are that sometimes, particularly the loans that come, they're often secured as collateral against key sectors. And when governments have got into trouble, what they found is that the Chinese government, which has owned a lot of the Chinese transnationals that have been involved, then kind of owns large quantities of your debt, and ultimately things like your electricity and kind of water industry. So there's a risk that you kind of lose some of your independence. So again, it's kind of be careful what you sign up for. And finally, we can argue that encouraging foreign direct investment is a form of a supply side policy. It's designed to increase competition for local firms, which maybe have been protected and sheltered before this point, and that creates the usual. That creates your usual, kind of supply side, blah 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 blah. AS1, AS2, downward pressure on inflation, upward pressure on growth, greater efficiency, and so on, which is fine unless local businesses are completely destroyed. In which case there's nothing left to compete. So the danger is that you're simply not able to compete with the transnational, multinational, and therefore, the local industrial base gets wiped out. So, is foreign direct investment likely to be beneficial? A lot depends on the deal that you get. So, one will depend on who needs who the most. Yeah, so if basically the transnational multinational comes and completely dominates your economy, then you need them a hell of a lot more than they need you. Then they're going to push you around, yeah, and you're probably going to get a poor deal. And a lot will depend on which sector they're coming into. So if they're coming to set up manufacturing bases, then that's pretty positive because it's giving you skills, experience, and knowledge that will allow you to add higher amounts of value in the future. You'll be able to copy, learn, experience, suppliers will build up, and so on. If it's primary product focused, then that's less positive, and you're not building those skills, and there's a risk that's going to push you into being, kind of further dependent on primary products, which we've talked about elsewhere. So, as with all these things, it depends.